Some places do not wait for destiny, they become it. The oldest wolves in Ashen Hollow had repeated those words for generations whenever the Moonveil River shimmered beneath the full moon, and every child had learned to stay far away from its silver waters after sunset. They whispered that the river remembered every promise ever broken and every soul brave enough to trust its quiet surface. Evelyn Carter had heard those stories since she was little, yet standing beneath the warm glow of an early summer afternoon, they felt no more frightening than the breeze that danced through the towering pines. She adjusted the simple basket resting against her hip and glanced over her shoulder one last time. The narrow forest trail behind her remained empty, leaving only birdsong and the distant rustle of leaves. She smiled to herself, relieved to have escaped the endless chores waiting back at the pack village. Being an Omega meant everyone expected kindness from her, endless patience from her, and quiet obedience from her. It was easier to disappear than to argue. That was why she treasured this hidden place. The Moonveil River curved through the forest like a ribbon of polished glass, untouched by fishermen, travelers, or curious children. Sunlight poured through the branches overhead, scattering tiny flecks of gold across the gentle current until the water looked alive with stars. Evelyn slipped off her worn shoes and stepped carefully across the smooth stones near the shore. The cool water wrapped around her ankles, carrying away the heat of the day. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the scent of fresh pine, wildflowers, and clean mountain air. For the first time all week, the tightness inside her chest began to fade. She laughed softly as a small fish darted between her feet, disappearing beneath the rippling surface before she could follow it with her eyes. No one could see her here. No one would remind her that Omegas belonged behind everyone else. No one would measure her worth by strength she never claimed to possess. She walked farther into the gentle current until the water reached just below her knees, dipping her hands beneath the surface and letting the cool stream flow through her fingers. The river seemed strangely warm beneath its sparkling skin, almost as though another heartbeat pulsed somewhere below. She frowned for only a moment before dismissing the feeling. Mountain rivers were full of surprises, she reminded herself. Somewhere deep beneath her, hidden by layers of crystal-clear water and shifting reflections, enormous golden eyes slowly opened. They did not blink. They did not hunt. They simply watched the young Omega standing above with a stillness older than memory itself. The great black wolf resting upon the smooth riverbed had ruled kingdoms, crossed battlefields, and terrified rival alphas with nothing more than a single glance. Yet now every ancient instinct inside him had fallen silent. The scent drifting through the water was unlike anything he had encountered in countless seasons. Gentle, bright, familiar in a way he could not explain. He remained perfectly motionless, unwilling to disturb even the smallest ripple surrounding her. Above him, Evelyn tilted her face toward the sun, unaware that the calm beneath her feet was not the river at all. It was the patient breath of the Alpha King's wolf, waiting in complete silence as destiny quietly stepped into the water. The current brushed gently around Evelyn Carter as she wandered another few steps through the shallow water, humming a tune her mother had once sung during quiet evenings by the fireplace. The melody floated across the river, light enough to disappear into the whispering pines, yet it reached far beneath the sparkling surface where ancient instincts had remained untouched for years. The massive black wolf did not move. His powerful body rested against smooth stones polished by centuries of flowing water, hidden so perfectly that even sunlight could not reveal his silhouette. Countless creatures had crossed this river before, sensing the quiet authority sleeping beneath them and fleeing without ever understanding why. Deer always avoided this stretch of water. Birds never landed on the overhanging branches. Even the fish instinctively swam around the silent guardian resting below. Yet the young Omega stood above him without fear because she knew nothing of the unseen presence surrounding her. That innocence stirred something unfamiliar deep within the wolf. His golden eyes followed every gentle movement she made as she gathered a handful of clear water and watched it slip through her fingers like liquid crystal. There was no arrogance in her posture, no hunger for power, no scent of ambition that usually surrounded members of the great packs. She carried only kindness, quiet resilience, and a loneliness that even the river itself seemed to recognize. Somewhere within the ancient creature, another heartbeat answered. It was not merely the instinct of a wolf. It belonged to Damian Blackwood, the Alpha King whose spirit shared the same powerful soul. Even while resting in his wolf form, fragments of his human thoughts drifted through the stillness. Impossible, he thought. The moon goddess had never allowed his wolf to remain calm around strangers. Every unfamiliar scent had always been judged as either threat or rival. Yet now there was only peace. The river itself seemed to slow as though honoring the strange silence unfolding beneath its surface. Evelyn glanced toward the opposite bank after hearing the faint crack of a branch somewhere deeper in the forest. She froze for a heartbeat, listening carefully. Nothing followed except the gentle rustling of leaves carried by the summer breeze. She smiled at herself, embarrassed by how easily old campfire stories still crept into her imagination. Everyone claimed mysterious things wandered these woods, but all she had ever found were curious rabbits, graceful foxes, and colorful birds. She stepped farther along the riverbank, completely unaware that every movement brought her closer to the deepest part of the channel. Beneath her, the wolf slowly lifted his head for the first time. Tiny waves rolled outward before disappearing against the rocks, so delicate that Evelyn mistook them for an ordinary current. She looked down, puzzled by the unexpected warmth brushing against her feet. For just an instant she thought she saw something golden flicker beneath the dancing reflections of sunlight, but the image vanished. Before her eyes could focus, she laughed softly and shook her head. The river was playing tricks on her again. Hidden below, the Alpha King's wolf watched her smile, and for reasons he could not begin to understand, he made a silent promise that no shadow, no storm, and no danger would ever reach the gentle Omega while she remained within the waters he had guarded for longer than anyone still living could remember. The afternoon sun drifted lower above the forest canopy, painting ribbons of amber across the quiet river as Evelyn Carter wandered farther from the familiar shoreline than she ever had before. The smooth stones beneath her feet gradually disappeared beneath deeper water, but the peaceful silence surrounding her made every step feel perfectly safe. She stretched one hand across the cool surface, smiling as tiny circles spread outward before fading into reflections of drifting clouds. Somewhere nearby, a dragonfly skimmed the water like a tiny jewel with shimmering wings, and Evelyn followed it with her eyes instead of watching where she placed her next step. Her foot landed on a patch of moss hidden beneath the clear current. It shifted without warning. She let out a quiet gasp as her balance disappeared. The gentle slope beneath the river dropped much faster than she expected, and the water suddenly rose from her knees to her shoulders in a single startled motion. The unexpected chill stole her breath for only an instant as she instinctively reached toward the nearest rock, but her fingertips brushed nothing except flowing water. She tried to steady herself, yet the current carried her another few feet into the deeper channel. Above, sunlight fractured into countless dancing beams, making it impossible to judge distance or direction. Evelyn closed her eyes for a heartbeat and forced herself to remain calm. She remembered her father once telling her that rivers rewarded patience more than panic. She allowed herself to float instead of fighting the current, hoping it would carry her toward shallower water. Beneath her, the ancient guardian reacted before a single frightened thought fully formed inside her mind. The enormous black wolf surged upward. With effortless grace, moving through the water so silently that not even the smallest splash disturbed the peaceful surface. Every instinct demanded that he protect the gentle soul drifting above him. Damian Blackwood felt the command echo through every part of his being. It was stronger than duty, stronger than the laws that had guided generations of Alpha Kings. It felt older than memory itself. Evelyn suddenly sensed unexpected warmth beneath her, as though the river itself had become solid for the briefest moment. Instead of sinking farther, she found herself drifting upward with surprising ease. The current that had seemed determined to pull her away softened into something almost gentle, guiding her little by little toward the smooth rocks near the bank. She never opened her eyes long enough to notice the enormous shadow moving beneath the reflections. She only felt an unexplainable calm settle over her racing heart. Moments later, her feet touched the riverbed once again. She stumbled onto the shallow stones, breathing deeply as drops of water rolled from her hair and sleeves. Turning back toward the sparkling current, she searched for whatever had helped her. The river looked exactly as it had only minutes before, peaceful and untouched beneath the afternoon sky. She laughed quietly, shaking her head at herself. Perhaps she had imagined the strange warmth. Perhaps the current had simply changed direction at the perfect moment. Hidden below, the great wolf slowly settled once more upon the smooth riverbed, watching until he was certain she stood safely beyond the deepest water. As Evelyn gathered her basket and began walking toward the forest trail, she paused for one final glance over her shoulder. For the smallest fraction of a second, two brilliant golden lights shimmered beneath the surface before vanishing into the silver-blue depths. She blinked once, smiled to herself, and continued home, never realizing that someone beneath the quiet river had already chosen to guard every step of her journey from that day forward. By the time Evelyn Carter reached the edge of Ashen Hollow, the golden light of afternoon had softened into the warm glow of early evening, and the familiar scent of fresh bread drifted from the village ovens. Children chased one another across the open square, while elders gathered beneath the ancient oak, sharing stories that seemed to grow taller with every passing season. Evelyn lowered her eyes as she walked through the center of the village, hoping no one would notice her damp skirt or the loose strands of chestnut hair still clinging to her shoulders. Unfortunately, quiet never remained quiet for long in a pack, where everyone believed they knew one another's business. "You came from the forest," an older woman observed, narrowing her eyes with gentle concern. Evelyn offered a small smile. "I only wanted a little peace by the river." The conversation around the oak stopped almost instantly. Several faces turned toward her at once. One of the hunters slowly lowered the cup in his hand. "Which river?" he asked. Evelyn hesitated, suddenly aware that every voice had disappeared. "Moonveil." A ripple of uneasy whispers spread across the gathering. An elderly wolf named Harold shook his head before releasing a long sigh. "That place should have remained untouched." Another villager quietly added, "Something has been different there these past few weeks." Evelyn frowned. "Different how?" A young shepherd stepped forward first. "My sheep refuse to drink from that part of the river now. They stopped nearly 50 yards away and refused to move another inch." A woman carrying a basket of herbs nodded in agreement. "Even the birds changed their paths. Every morning they fly around that stretch instead of across it." The oldest storyteller in the village rested both hands upon his walking stick before speaking in a voice so calm that everyone instinctively listened. "The forest does not become silent without reason. When every creature chooses the same path away from one place, it is wise for people to notice." Evelyn remembered the strange warmth beneath the water and the pair of golden lights she thought she had imagined. For just a heartbeat, uncertainty flickered across her face. Before she could speak again, another hunter laughed softly and waved a dismissive hand. "They have been calling it the river beast again." Several younger wolves exchanged nervous glances. "Some say it is only another old legend," someone murmured. "Others believe something ancient has returned." Harold looked directly at Evelyn. "Promise us you will not go there again." She wanted to explain that the river had never felt frightening. If anything, it had felt unexpectedly peaceful, almost welcoming. Yet the concern in their eyes was sincere, and she did not wish to argue. "I promise I will be careful," she answered gently. The conversation slowly shifted toward other matters, but Evelyn noticed more than one villager glancing toward the darkening tree line as though expecting someone to emerge from the forest. As night settled over Ashen Hollow, silver moonlight quietly spread across the distant river once again. Deep beneath its calm surface, the great black wolf lifted his gaze toward the stars reflected above him. The echo of the gentle Omega's voice lingered in his memory with surprising clarity. Long after every bird had fallen silent and every lantern in the village had been extinguished, he remained awake beneath the flowing water, watching the direction she had disappeared, while somewhere far beyond the forest, the ancient bond between two souls took another silent step toward a destiny neither of them yet understood. Morning mist drifted through the towering pines as the first rays of sunlight reached the distant cliffs beyond Moonveil River, and far from Ashen Hollow, hidden behind towering stone walls that few wolves had ever entered, Damian Blackwood slowly opened his eyes. His breathing remained calm as the last traces of his wolf form faded, leaving only silence inside a chamber carved from dark granite and polished oak. Every morning for years had begun exactly the same. He would return from guarding the sacred river before dawn, dismiss every unnecessary conversation, and bury himself beneath endless reports from neighboring packs. Yet this morning refused to feel ordinary. The scent of wildflowers carried by the river still lingered vividly in his memory. He could remember the quiet melody the young Omega had hummed without effort. He remembered the peaceful expression on her face as she watched sunlight dance across the water. Most of all, he remembered the strange calm that had settled over his wolf the moment she stepped into the river. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. "Your Majesty," came a respectful voice beyond the heavy wooden door. "The council has assembled," Damien answered without raising his voice. "Give them another 30 minutes. The footsteps outside paused in obvious surprise before retreating down the corridor. Delaying the council had become almost unheard of. Damien walked toward the tall windows overlooking miles of endless forest. Somewhere beyond those distant trees stood the quiet village where Evelyn Carter had returned only hours before. He had ruled the Northern Territories for many years, memorizing every border, every mountain trail, and every village beneath his protection. Yet until yesterday, Ashen Hollow had never demanded more than routine attention. Now he found himself searching for the faint line of smoke rising from its chimneys. He rested one hand against the cool stone beside the window as his wolf stirred once more. "Find her." The words echoed gently rather than as a command. It felt less like instinct and more like certainty. Damien frowned thoughtfully. Why? The answer came not through language, but through emotion. Warmth, trust, peace. Feelings his wolf had never associated with strangers before. A quiet laugh escaped him despite himself. "You have frightened entire armies without taking a single step," he whispered. "Now one gentle Omega has left you speechless." Moments later, the chamber doors opened again as his oldest advisor, Nathaniel Cross, entered with careful respect. His silver hair reflected decades of wisdom, and his sharp eyes immediately noticed the unusual expression on the king's face. "Something has changed," Nathaniel observed. Damien looked toward the forest once more instead of denying it. "Tell me about Ashen Hollow." Nathaniel blinked. "The village near Moonveil River?" Damien nodded once. "Everything." The advisor searched his memory. "A peaceful pack. Small harvests. Honest people. They rarely asked the crown for anything." He hesitated, before adding, "Although recently there have been unusual rumors surrounding the river." Damien remained perfectly still. "What kind of rumors?" "Villagers believe an ancient guardian has returned." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "Most dismiss it as another old legend." Damien allowed himself the smallest smile, knowing the legend had never truly disappeared. He turned away from the window and reached for a simple travel cloak instead of his royal attire. Nathaniel watched in complete confusion. "Your Majesty, where are you going?" Damien fastened the weathered cloak across his shoulders, hiding every symbol of the crown before answering with quiet certainty. "To learn why, after all these years, the moon goddess has finally given my wolf someone it refuses to forget." The journey to Ashen Hollow took less than half a day on horseback, yet Damien Blackwood rode without the royal escort that normally surrounded the Alpha King. His dark cloak concealed the fine tailoring beneath, while a weathered leather satchel and a simple traveling coat transformed the most powerful ruler in the Northern Territories into an ordinary wanderer. Only his silver eyes remained impossible to disguise. They reflected the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime carrying responsibilities far greater than himself. As the village finally appeared beyond the rolling hills, Damien slowed his horse and took in every detail. Children laughed near the old oak tree. Bakers carried warm loaves from stone ovens. Farmers greeted one another with easy smiles. It was a peaceful place, untouched by the ambition and politics that filled royal halls. His wolf stirred again, not because of danger, but because a familiar scent drifted gently through the morning air. Wildflowers, fresh pine, rain-kissed earth, the same gentle fragrance that had lingered over the river. Damien followed it almost without thinking until he reached the small marketplace where villagers exchanged vegetables, woven baskets, and handmade candles. At the far end of the square, Evelyn Carter carefully arranged fresh herbs beside an elderly woman whose hands trembled slightly with age. She greeted every customer with the same warm smile, whether they purchased a full bundle or only a single sprig. When an older man accidentally dropped a sack of apples, Evelyn immediately knelt to help him gather every piece before he could apologize. She never looked around to see whether anyone noticed her kindness. She simply offered it because it felt natural. Damien remained several yards away, quietly observing. There was no performance in her actions, no desire for recognition. Everything about her seemed effortless. The old stories claimed that true strength often revealed itself in silence rather than triumph. And for the first time, Damien wondered whether those stories had been speaking about someone exactly like her. Evelyn finished helping the elderly merchant before lifting another basket toward a nearby stall. As she turned, her eyes briefly met Damien's across the marketplace. She stopped for only a heartbeat. There was something strangely familiar about the traveler standing beneath the maple tree. She had never seen him before, yet those calm silver eyes awakened the same unexplained comfort she had felt while standing in the river. Damien offered a polite nod instead of speaking. Evelyn smiled in return, the simple expression bright enough to soften the seriousness he usually carried without realizing it. Before either of them could say another word, a playful breeze swept through the marketplace, scattering several loose papers from a wooden table. Evelyn instinctively hurried after them, laughing softly as they fluttered toward the road. Damien stepped forward at the same moment, catching the final page before it drifted into a puddle beside the path. Their hands almost reached for it together, stopping only inches apart. "Thank you," Evelyn said with genuine gratitude. Her voice was exactly as gentle as he remembered beneath the afternoon sun beside the river. Damien handed her the paper with an easy smile. "It seems the wind enjoys causing small adventures." Evelyn laughed quietly. "It usually waits until I finish organizing everything." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, the marketplace continued its cheerful rhythm, completely unaware that destiny had finally brought two lives together on dry land after introducing them first beneath the quiet waters of Moonveil River. The following morning arrived wrapped in cool mountain air and drifting clouds that painted moving shadows across the forest floor. Evelyn Carter found herself thinking about the mysterious traveler far more often than she expected. There had been nothing remarkable about his clothing or the horse he rode into the village, yet every time she remembered his calm silver eyes, the same quiet feeling she had experienced beside the river returned without explanation. Hoping to clear her thoughts, she gathered a small basket of fresh herbs requested by an elderly healer who lived beyond the Eastern Trail. The path wound gently toward Moonveil River before climbing into the hills, and although she had promised the villagers she would be careful, there was no other route. As she walked beneath the swaying branches, the familiar sound of flowing water welcomed her once again. She stopped several yards from the riverbank, smiling softly at the peaceful current glimmering beneath the afternoon sun. "I only came to pass by," she whispered to herself, almost as though speaking to the quiet river. Hidden beneath the clear water, Damien Blackwood had already sensed her presence long before her footsteps reached the shoreline. His wolf lifted its head immediately, responding to her familiar scent with the same calm certainty that had surprised him the day before. He remained beneath the surface, watching silently while she continued along the narrow path. Then another scent drifted through the forest. It did not belong to Evelyn. Several mounted hunters from a neighboring territory appeared along the opposite bank, laughing as they examined unusual tracks pressed into the damp earth. One of them pointed toward the river with obvious excitement. "The stories might be true," he said. "Something enormous has been living here." Another knelt beside the water, studying a massive paw print left hours before. "Imagine the reward if we discover what made these tracks." Evelyn heard the conversation and instinctively stepped behind the trunk of a large cedar tree, uncertain whether she should interrupt. Damien's expression hardened beneath the water, not from anger, but from concern. His identity had remained hidden for years because the sacred river served as both sanctuary and ancient responsibility. Curious strangers could disturb far more than their own peace if they wandered too close. The hunters continued following the shoreline, searching for more signs while speaking loudly enough for every bird nearby to scatter into the sky. One of them picked up a smooth black stone resting near the water and tossed it playfully into the deepest part of the channel. Gentle ripples spread across the surface. Evelyn watched the circles widen until the entire river seemed to breathe. The sunlight suddenly caught something beneath the water. A shape far larger than any ordinary wolf moved with effortless grace through the crystal depths before disappearing behind curtains of shimmering light. Evelyn stood perfectly still. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with astonishment. She knew what she had seen this time. Those brilliant golden eyes were real. They belonged to the silent guardian who had carried her safely toward the shore only a day before. Across the river, the hunters stared in confusion as the current settled once again, leaving no trace except quiet water and drifting reflections. Hidden beneath the surface, Damien remained unseen, but one truth had already become impossible to escape. The mysterious bond between him and the gentle Omega was no longer carried only by instinct. Now it was shared by a secret that only the river, the ancient wolf, and Evelyn herself would ever truly understand. The unexpected glimpse beneath the river stayed with Evelyn Carter long after she returned to Ashen Hollow. She completed every chore as she always had, greeted every neighbor with her usual kindness, and helped prepare baskets for the coming harvest. Yet her thoughts repeatedly wandered back to the quiet golden eyes beneath the water. They had not looked threatening. If anything, they had carried the same calm she had seen in the mysterious travelers standing beneath the maple tree. The realization seemed impossible, and still she could not dismiss it. As evening settled over the village, the sound of approaching horses echoed through the main road. Several riders wearing finely crafted cloaks entered the square, followed by attendants carrying banners embroidered with the silver crest of the Northern Territories. Conversations immediately faded. Shopkeepers stepped away from their stalls while elders straightened their backs in respectful silence. Royal messengers rarely visited small villages without reason. Evelyn quietly moved toward the edge of the gathering, preferring to remain unnoticed as always. The leader of the delegation unrolled a scroll and spoke with a calm, practiced voice. By order of the Royal Council, every nearby settlement is requested to report any unusual activity surrounding Moonveil River. His Majesty has taken a personal interest in preserving the ancient sanctuary. Curious whispers spread through the crowd. One hunter eagerly stepped forward. "We have heard stories of a great beast beneath the water." Another quickly added, "Some travelers believe it has returned after many years." The messenger listened without revealing any emotion. No one is to disturb the river. No one is to pursue the guardian, should one truly exist. Evelyn lowered her eyes, remembering the graceful shadow slipping silently beneath the current. She wondered why the king himself would care so deeply about a forgotten river hidden inside an ordinary forest. Before anyone could ask another question, a familiar traveler slowly walked into the village square from the western road. Damien Blackwood still wore the same simple cloak, blending easily among merchants and visitors. Only Evelyn noticed the subtle change in his expression as he observed the royal delegation. Their eyes met across the gathering once again. This time neither of them looked away immediately. Damien offered the smallest reassuring smile, one that somehow eased the uncertainty growing inside her heart. She found herself returning the smile without thinking. At that exact moment, an elderly child stumbled while carrying a wooden bucket that rolled across the uneven stones of the square. Evelyn reacted instantly, hurrying forward before anyone else could move. Damien reached the child from the opposite direction at nearly the same time. Together, they helped gather the scattered belongings, neither speaking until the grateful child hurried back toward waiting family members. "You always notice the people others overlook," Damien said quietly. Evelyn looked surprised. Everyone deserves to be noticed. Her answer lingered between them with unexpected warmth. Damien had attended grand ceremonies, negotiated treaties, and stood before thousands of wolves throughout his reign, yet no words had ever felt as quietly powerful as those. Before he could reply, the lead royal messenger turned toward him with visible surprise. For a brief instant, recognition flashed across the man's face before Damien answered with the slightest shake of his head. The messenger immediately lowered his gaze and continued walking as though nothing had happened. Evelyn noticed the strange exchange, but could not understand it. She watched the traveler disappear into the evening crowd, carrying more questions than answers. Above the village, the first stars quietly appeared across the darkening sky, while far beyond the rooftops, Moonveil River reflected their light like polished silver, patiently waiting for the moment when every hidden truth would finally rise to the surface. Moonlight poured across Moonveil River like a path of liquid silver, and before dawn had fully arrived, Evelyn Carter found herself standing once again beneath the towering pines that guarded its quiet banks. She had not planned to return, yet her heart had carried her there as naturally as the current carried fallen leaves downstream. The forest was silent except for the gentle song of flowing water. She stepped to the edge of the river and smiled softly. "I do not know who you are," she whispered toward the shimmering surface, "but thank you for helping me." For several peaceful moments, nothing happened. Then the river answered. Tiny circles spread across the still water without a breeze to create them. A familiar warmth drifted through the cool morning air, and the same golden light she had seen beneath the surface slowly appeared once more. Evelyn did not step backward. She simply watched with quiet wonder as the enormous black wolf emerged gracefully from the water, every movement calm and unhurried. His dark coat glistened beneath the first light of dawn, while his golden eyes rested gently upon hers with unmistakable recognition. There was no fear between them, only a silence that somehow felt warmer than words. The great wolf lowered his head respectfully before taking a single step onto the smooth stones along the shore. Soft light surrounded him like drifting mist, and before Evelyn's astonished eyes, the ancient guardian gradually gave way to the familiar figure she had met in the village. Standing where the wolf had been only moments before was Damien Blackwood, his silver eyes reflecting the rising sun. He wore no royal cloak, no jeweled crown, and no symbols of power. He stood before her simply as himself. Evelyn searched his face before a quiet smile slowly appeared. "It was you," she whispered. Damien nodded. "From the moment you stepped into the river." She looked toward the peaceful water before meeting his eyes again. "You saved me," he answered with complete honesty. "My wolf chose to protect you before my heart understood why." The gentle breeze carried their words across the river as birds began greeting the new morning from the branches overhead. Damien looked toward the flowing water that had guarded his family's greatest secret for generations. "For many years I believed my duty was only to protect this place," he said quietly. "Then you reminded me that the greatest strength is not found in power. It is found in kindness freely given." Evelyn lowered her gaze for a moment, humbled by words she never expected to hear. "I only tried to live the way my parents taught me." Damien smiled, and for the first time in many years, the weight of the crown no longer seemed to rest so heavily upon his shoulders. "Then they taught you something every kingdom should remember." As the sun rose higher above the forest, its golden light transformed the river into a mirror of shimmering brilliance. Somewhere deep within the ancient current, the quiet magic that had watched over Moonveil River for countless generations seemed to awaken with peaceful approval. The lonely guardian was no longer alone, and the gentle Omega who had always believed she belonged in the background finally discovered that destiny had been walking beside her from the moment she stepped into the water. From that morning forward, the people of Ashen Hollow often said the river looked brighter than it ever had before, and whenever someone asked why, the elders simply smiled and answered that true strength had never belonged to the loudest voice or the strongest hand. It had always belonged to the heart willing to choose kindness first, because sometimes the greatest love stories begin long before two people meet, waiting quietly beneath the surface until the perfect moment to rise into the light.